Some opening shot thoughts. T-minus 1 week. Chicago's Board of Education will have to solve its stalemate or face the prospect of yet another shutdown of Chicago's public schools. The fact, and make no mistake, this shutdown will be entirely politically self-inflicted. That's because 10 board members currently are opposing CPS's proposed budget plan that closes a $734 million budget gap without new short-term borrowing and by pushing a $175 million pension payment onto the city. They're doing this at the behest of Mayor Johnson and the powerful Chicago Teachers Union. They want the district to take on these costly burdens despite being vehemently opposed in the past. Now remember, they used to claim previous leadership wanted to make Wall Street fat cats rich by borrowing so much. Now it's the total opposite. They're claiming the district has to do the borrowing. They used to claim Mayor Lightfoot was balancing the budget on the backs of students by having CPS pick up the pension payment. Now they say the total opposite. So what changed? Well, the answer is obvious. They're in power now, and forcing the city to make that payment makes Mayor Johnson's job tougher. CTU has made the claim over and over again that Governor Pritzker and the state could solve all of this by paying CPS the $1.6 billion it claims it owes.
Neighborhood that I come from, when you owe someone money, and in my neighborhood it can just be $20, you don't get to tell somebody you owe that you ain't paying them. You don't just get to do that.
This, of course, responds to Governor Pritzker's comments from yesterday where he reiterated what he said all along. That money is not there.
What CTU and the mayor are talking about, which is, providing another billion or $1.6 billion for Chicago public schools, that's just not going to happen. And it's not because we shouldn't. We should. We should try to find the money, but we don't have those resources today. And we're not going to see the resources from the federal government level either.
Now, it's a clever sleight of hand for the CTU president to claim the state owes that money to CPS. The reality is it does not. A law passed in 2017 calls for schools to reach so-called 90% of full funding by 2027, although that's more aspirational than mandatory. And there are reasons to doubt the authenticity of CTU's claims right now. Lawmakers I speak with say that for all the hand-wringing, neither the mayor nor CTU have actually engaged in the hard work of meeting face-to-face and lobbying for that money. Instead, they run for the TV cameras to make a PR splash. But they are hurting their own cause. They can't bully lawmakers and the governor to send CPS money that doesn't exist. They're making enemies where they need allies. Last night, elected school board member Jessica Biggs told us CTU should stick with what it used to say about borrowing.
It is a terrible decision in this moment when we have a balanced budget that does not require us to borrow in any way, for us to engage in any borrowing for something that is not our obligated cost.
Now, in 1 week, the flip-flops, the demonizing of the governor, and the press conferences won't matter. If the board doesn't agree to a budget, then this politically driven stalemate will once again hurt those that can least afford it: Chicago's school children.
Coming up on Paris on Politics.
Tonight, crisis averted for now. Why Suburban Transit voted to bail out the CTA, and the odds of Springfield coming and rescuing CTA, Pace, and Metra. Darren Bailey got creamed by Governor Pritzker in 2022. Now he's gearing up to run again. Why he says this time could be different. And what will the city's front yard, Grant Park, look like for the next 100 years? The Park District unveils new plans.
This is Paris on Politics from Fox 32 Chicago.
And welcome to Paris on Politics. Chicago CTA riders, you can breathe a little easier. There will be no major service cuts or fare hikes for the foreseeable future. That's because of a small little bailout of sorts coming from your friends at Metra and Pace. So why did the suburbs essentially vote to subsidize the city to the tune of $74 million? And what is the status of a long-term funding fix? Joining us is Regional Transportation Board Chairman Kirk Dillard. Kirk Dillard of the RTA, thanks for joining us. You had a long meeting today. The RTA board, you yourself included, voted unanimously to offer this $74 million short-term funding for the CTA to avert a fiscal cliff. Tell us what this will do.
Well, it avoids the fiscal cliff at least for a little while. We have a very limited amount of discretionary funding, but we took about 1.7% of our budget, and PACE and Metra, which would face a fiscal cliff where their federal COVID relief monies would last a little longer, are being moved to essentially the CTA to give the legislature more time to act on closing a $771 million hole that's there. And it's like that with every major transit city in America. And I will say that in Chicago, we've held on to our federal relief monies better than any other city in America. We are the last state really to have no relief, but we've intentionally held on to our federal COVID relief monies to give the legislature as much time to figure out how they're going to close this gap, which is there of $700+ million. But today's actions, CTA riders should continue to lobby their legislators, but it provides relief for another few months.
So what I'm hearing is the CTA was going to go over the fiscal cliff before Metra and PACE, so this little kind of moving around of money made sense. So for the suburban rider that says, hey, why are you taking money that's targeted for PACE and Metra, giving it to the city? Isn't that a bailout? What do you say to them?
It's not a bailout. We're all one region. CTA, Metra, and PACE, their people ride two legs of the system or all three legs of the system every day. We are one region, it's one system, and somebody may take PACE to get on Metra or take Metra and then eventually, like I do, get on the CTA. So we're all one system. And this transfer today proves that regionally we are attuned with one another, and the mass transit system to northeastern Illinois and to the state of Illinois, according to Argonne Laboratory, is worth $35 billion a year in economic development. So whether you ride the system or not, you have a massive stake in having a strong mass transit system. I just saw your previous entry with respect to the Chicago Public Schools. The Chicago Public Schools and the schools in Peoria and Pinckneyville benefit from a strong mass transit system in metropolitan Chicago. We rate as a state dead last in our support of mass transit, and I'm confident that my former colleagues in Springfield, our legislature, and the governor will come up with a solution, realizing the importance of moving the 1.2 million people or riders we do every day in northeastern Illinois.
And I know this little fix kind of buys 2 to 3 more months, so into next spring, it gives lawmakers that amount of time to get something done. And I want to get to some of their potential solutions in a second, but we just saw some video this morning. You had some very anxious paratransit riders worried about some cuts to some of those services. What's your message to them?
Well, the message to them is that we're a victim of our own success. We created an innovative pilot program where paratransit, or people with disabilities, ADA is what we call it, riders can actually use the services of Uber. And the program has taken off and been so successful that it went over anybody's initial expectations. We will continue that service. We've made a few minor adjustments because it was a pilot program, but we want to make sure that that pilot or that program grows and sustain. It's a new program. It's only been around for a year or so. It's been wildly successful, and the little refinements around the edges we had to make to that will continue to make sure the program exists for them.
All right, back to the Springfield action. The governor, lawmakers have sounded optimistic that they're perhaps going to come to a deal on some transit funding in the fall veto session in October. Do you feel positive that that's going to happen?
Well, I'm sure that our legislature and Governor Pritzker will come up with a solution for mass transit funding. I hope it's enough. We use a number about 770 million, and we need more than that to improve service. My vision is to have someone step out of their home and go to the CTA or Metra or Pace and not even have to look at when their train's going to arrive. We want more service, safer service, more efficient service, and we do need more than the 771 million to give you better service than you have today. But I'm confident they're going to come up with it like most other major states have done. Again, because of our great, very excellent fiscal stewardship, we're the last of the states to really run out of COVID relief money. But I'm quite confident whether it's October or when it will be soon, we'll have relief from the legislature and the governor.
And the number they put on it is around $1.5 billion. There was a bill in spring. It did stall. It proposed paying for it with new taxes on ride share and food delivery services. Do you think those kinds of fees would be part of the final funding package?
Well, I don't know what the final funding package will be. I'm agnostic as long as we get the money. That $1.5 billion that you say is supported by Cook County Board President Tony Prenkwinkle and advocacy groups, including the Regional Planning Agency for Metropolitan Chicago, that thinks we need about $1.5 billion to really get the kind of system we all need and our riders deserve in metropolitan Chicago. It'll be a menu of new revenue sources, I am sure, including some use of interest money on funds that are in the road fund of the state's transportation department that does not, need to have a new revenue source.
The road fund, that always kind of runs into opposition from some of the road builders and some of the construction unions that do want some of that money to build roads, but that...
Paris, I always tell them our buses run on those roads and they build the bridges for Metra, of which some are more than 100 years old and still made of timber.
Wow, yeah, I look at some of those bridges that aren't made of timber, but some of them do look like they might need a little bit of a facelift. What about the notion of having more consolidation instead of a separate Pace and Metra and CTA? There had been proposed a regional sort of oversight board to replace the RTA that would sort of coordinate all of this.
Well, we at the RTA have always been for reform and don't expect to have new revenues without reform. The RTA has always espoused, whether it's us or a new version of centralized transit agency, which the legislature's proposed. The RTA, or NETA, as the new board may be called, Northeastern Illinois Transit Association or area, needs to have better control, more coordinating control. And again, the reason we moved today 74 million from Metra and Pace to help out the CTA is it proves we're one region. And so whatever the new board is going to be called or whatever it is, they need to have the authority to be a better coordinator with respect to CTA, Metra, and Pace, because we're all one region.
All right, Kirk Dillard, and I know you're intently focused on what's going down in Springfield. It does sound like there have been some negotiations over the last few weeks, so for perhaps some promising news to come in the next couple months. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you. A lot of smart legislators working on it in Springfield, and I'm optimistic. Thanks, Paris.
Sounds good. Good to talk to you. We'll talk to you soon. And like it or not, the race for 2026 is already underway. Candidates are beginning to collect petition signatures to get on the ballot. Governor Pritzker has already announced he's going for a third term, and a handful of Republicans have decided to throw their hat in the ring on the GOP side as well. That includes DuPage County Sheriff James Mendrick and fiscal analyst Ted Dabrowski, to name a few. Now, this week, a familiar face threw a trial balloon up himself, Darren Bailey. He ran for governor in 2022 and lost by a sizable 55-42 margin. Bailey struggled to gain traction north of I-80 and especially in the city of Chicago. So I asked him this week whether he believes things will be different this time around.
For the past several weeks, we've been praying and thinking about this, kind of leaving it on the back burner. And last night, I had a friend ask me kind of the same question. They said, well, let's just throw it up out there and let's put it on Facebook and let's see what kind of reaction you get. And I thought maybe I'd get, kind of more pushback to settle it so I could just go back to farming and living life in Southern Illinois. But the reaction has been very impressive. So we continue for the next few weeks to just submit this and consider and think. And if I believe there's a path to victory, which ultimately that's up to the people, 45% turnout in 2022 just did not cut it. I think there's a lot more frustration. The people of Illinois, Paris, are looking for leadership. They're looking for someone who's proven that leadership, and they're looking for someone that they can trust. And I think I bring that to the table in consideration to who I've seen announced, who I think is going to announce, and I think Illinois deserves more, and I think I can provide that if the people so choose to put their trust in me.
Grant Park, it's the city's front yard, of course, and the Chicago Park District says it is past due time for a new master plan to bring it into the future for generations to come. That could mean some pie-in-the-sky projects like closing off roads that run through the park and even capping Lakeshore Drive. The price tag? Probably a lot. Now, joining us now is Leslie Recht, head of the Grant Park Advisory Council. Leslie, thank you very much for speaking with us. So this week, the Park District put forth their plans. You had a meeting among all the neighbors around Grant Park to talk about them. What do you think? What do you like? What do you not like from some of these framework plans?
Well, it's certainly time for the Park District to look again at Grant Park. The framework plan that was done in 2002 was put together at a time when there were a lot fewer residents living downtown, and of course there are a lot more large events that are happening in Grant Park today than there were before. So both of those sides of the coin need to be looked at. But our hope, at least talking to stakeholders, talking to people who live around the park, is that the Park District will do more for the residents who live near the park, who want to use the park on a more frequent basis, and protect the park better from some of the damage that's ongoing from all the large events that happen.
And the fact that those events close off the park, not just for the period that they are underway, but for building out the events and then for the cleanup. But some of the more intriguing proposals here is we look at some of the designs, closing off streets like Columbus and Balbo to make them more like promenades. What do you think? Should they do that?
Well, there are alternative proposals that are up there. And of course, anybody who wants to look at them can look at the Park District website. If you look under Grant Park, you'll see all the proposals. I think there's a proposal to narrow Columbus, not necessarily close it off. And there's parking on Columbus now. I think the proposal is to leave the parking on Columbus, which has been very popular. We've got a lot of new activities going on. There's pickleball, if you've noticed all the people playing.
Never heard of it, pickleball.
Never heard of it. That's been very, very popular. Of course, tennis and a dog-friendly area. There's a whole node of activity. And there also is a proposal, of course, to close off Ida B. Wells. And I think that's controversial. Some people support it, some people don't. So that's the kind of thing that we need to have conversation about and see what the implications are for some of these proposals.
Well, I think some folks are talking about having continuity in the park and having it not chopped up by roadways, for instance, Lakeshore Drive. So what about the proposal to perhaps bury the drive and then pave the parkland over it so that you have one contiguous park all the way to the lakefront?
Well, that's a proposal that was made years ago. It's something that has been talked about before. Our officers have some questions about whether it's feasible to make Lakeshore Drive go underneath at that point for any reasonable amount of money. And of course, you've got the water issues and you've got a lot of other things.
Let's just guess it's going to cost in the billions to do that.
Right, exactly. So that's something we can talk about, but I have to say from my perspective, I'd like to get things done that can be done for reasonable amounts of money that would make the park work better for people.
What do you think what are those reasonable things?
Well, in Hutchinson Field, we've got some baseball diamonds that have been there for about 80 years while the park has functioned. They get flooded in the spring. There's no proper drainage. Of course, you've got all the events. One of the proposals that we really like is moving the ball fields up to Butler Field, which has underground watering. It would be much more accessible for the players. And then, of course, you also have some ball fields in Upper Hutch. So things like that could be done for a reasonable amount of money. They're things that I think are feasible in the short term.
Back to the things that are going to cost a lot. What about capping the train tracks? You've got bridges that go over the train tracks, but there's some thought that maybe you can put, like Millennium Park did. You know, it really is, for all intents and purposes, a green roof, because there's nothing but train tracks under there. So what about doing that for all those other train tracks?
Well, again, it's certainly something that could be looked at. As you said, it would cost a lot of money. So you've got that balance between adding additional parkland and not. And we had Mayor Daley pushing Millennium Park and getting the contributions necessary. There needs to be the political will to do some of these projects that are major, major projects. As I said, what I'm looking at and what some of our officers are looking at are more amenities for the people who live in the area. The south end of the park was never finished. You've got the sculpture there. I call it the legs. Some people like it, some people don't, but the contract...
that go all the way up to the torso, basically.
Yes,
and
up to the torso.
nothing above.
Right, nothing above. It's a fine sculpture, but the contract for that sculpture being there is coming up next year. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we've talked about is to move that sculpture somewhere else and have some activity centers in that area for the residents, maybe some playgrounds, maybe, you know, there could be movies down at that end of the park. There could be some other functions that serve the residents.
There are some fun areas of the park close to Congress. You've got the summer dance area over there. Mm-hmm. That's kind of fun. Well, tell us about the next steps now. The public will get a chance to weigh in on the designs the Park District put out there until mid to late September, correct?
September 19th is the date that they say they're going to cut off comments received on this current draft. What the Park District needs to do is take all the comments that they're getting, obviously talk to the alders, because we have 4 alders around Grant Park that have input into what, you know, they're close to their constituents. They're very interested in this process. That's Riley, Conway, Pat Dowell, and Alderman Robinson. And then the Park District will come back with a final proposal, and that will go out to the public again. We're hoping that that's going to happen this year. I don't know if that's the case. This has been going on for almost 3 years. And the other piece of it, of course, is funding. And it's very, very important to look at who could pay for some of the things that need to be done. I would like to see some of the residents who live around Grant Park, some of the property taxes from them be converted into a TIF, so some portion of that could again be applied to Grant Park. The skateboard park at the south end of Grant Park was built with TIF funds in 2014, and that to me is very appropriate to have some of that paid for by the residents. Or
maybe like a special kind of levy, or like the Millennium Park model, that was largely private money and philanthropic money that came in on that. Leslie Recht, thank you for coming in.